about to plug my phone into this newly refurbished end table. Yep, it's got a built-in outlet so that short charger cord cable that comes with your phone can actually still comfortably reach. Want to plug your laptop in without having to dive behind the couch and find that outlet? No problem. It'll charge it for you too. Oh, and best of all, you don't have to do any wiring. Come with me and I'll show you how I turned this, let's call it well-loved end table, into this updated refurb. Let's go.
As with most refurbishing projects, this one is going to start with removing the old finish. And with this piece, the main problem really was water damage and staining to the existing finish. Structurally, this piece was pretty sound. It is solid wood, not pressed board or plywood, and I even tested its strength by sitting on it. It held me without a wobble. In this montage of sanding between the raindrops, I'm going to show you a few options for sanding. The first option is quite a bit of overkill, but it removes the most material in the shortest amount of time, and that is using the belt sander. Might I recommend clamping the piece in place for this method? This would be more appropriate for a piece with a lot of flat surfaces, like a table or bookcase, and you'll need to avoid holding the sander in one place for too long, or it will dig in. Up next, we have the random orbital sander, and this is probably my recommended method. Mine in particular is corded, so I don't have to worry about swapping out batteries, and it connects to a shop vac with ease for a simple dust collection system. The key, as with any sander, is to keep it flat the entire time. As tempting as it is to try to let it dig in with one edge to scrape a stubborn spot down, that ends up creating low spots and more problems when sanding to higher grits and applying an even coat of finish later on. About now, you'll see that I got chased inside by the weather, so I'm going to hand sand the concave board that allows you to pull the drawer open. I wanted to avoid changing the shape of this section, so the best option was to sand by hand. Now, if you wanted to sand the entire thing by hand, you definitely could. It would just take a while. The last method I have is the cordless mouse sander. I'm using this to get into the corners and spots that is difficult to get into with the orbital sander. Using caution, the orbital sander probably would be fine, it would fit, and a few touch-ups with the hand sanding would work, but I find this is a little bit easier without the cord and the dust collection tube attached. I wouldn't want to use the battery-operated sander on the entire piece because the one I have only has one battery, and having to wait for it to charge would make this take a lot longer than it should. Now that everything is sanded to 80 grit, I'm going to address the one style change that I'm making in this piece. On the sides and front there is an overhang, and on the front it looks fine as it aligns with the drawer front, but on the sides it looks a little sloppy. Being that it's less than 1/8 of an inch overhang, it just kind of looks like someone grabbed a random board and slapped it on the top and then never sanded it down to size or didn't know how to cut the right size to start with. I'm just not a fan of it. So after sanding, I was able to identify where the nail holes are, those pale circles, and that they wouldn't interfere with any tools. So I chose to use a flush cut bit on my router for this, but it could be done with a handsaw and some sanding if you really needed to. The flush cut bit has a wheel that will run along the piece that is the depth you want and prevent the bit from cutting in deeper than you want like a normal straight bit would. Up next is just to run through the sandpaper grits to remove any marks from the 80 grit and make sure everything stains evenly. In this case, it is 100 and 120 grit. I want the piece to absorb as much stain as possible for a deeper color, and going to higher grits, although it creates for a smoother surface, it creates a less porous surface, and that would absorb less stain with each coat, taking longer to get to the deep color that I want. Then it was time to stain. To make this as DIY as possible, I used a combination stain and polyurethane in one to see how it would work. This is a water-based product, so it's easy to clean up and less volatile. The color of this one is true black. I protected the ground with some plastic and donned some gloves before I started applying the finish. Now, I like to apply the finish with a cloth rag rather than a brush, so for me the gloves are really important. Using a brush should work just as well too. I start with the insides and back before the outside and front so that I can turn the piece without leaving smudges, and I can catch any drips or runs on the more visible surfaces before they dry. After one coat, the finish was a lot grayer than I had hoped for, but after a second coat, sorry, that one didn't get filmed, the true black color was much more believable. I added a third coat to the top and outside for good measure and let it dry thoroughly.
Alright, time to add the outlet. Now, this is something that I did on one of the first DIY projects I had ever done. For a DIY project, this is one of the simplest, and it's actually a pretty cheap way to do this kind of electrifying an end table or a coffee table or something like that, to where you just want to have an outlet closer to your chair or your couch. So I'm going to use an extension cord. So, no wiring involved. So, I'm going to start out figuring out the width of the outlet. Take our little tape measure. We're about just shy of 3 inches. Now I know this is black on black, so it's hard to see, but I'm just going to make a mark about 1.5 inches. Pencil line just to help me center this on the board. So on this one particularly, the drawer doesn't come all the way to the back, as well as the drawer ends about here. It's not a full depth drawer, this back panel. This, a lot of the stability for the shelf extends well beyond that drawer, so you don't see the drawer from the back side. So there's room to place this just under on the inside. Now, you can cut it out, you could put it in this way and put a little wall cover over it. You get real creative with how you want it to look. I'm going to try to make this as hidden as possible, and I have that gap from underneath the drawer, so we're just going to glue this on the underside. So now we're going to measure across the width of the shelf, and you can see here that we are 7 inches width, and put the pencil line, which I already had it drawn on there for you guys, because upside down and inside out math is complicated. Now we're going to take our hot glue gun that's been preheating. This is going to go on the underside, so these are going to face down. The 2 prong is down. Don't put glue over top of the outlets, that's not going to be a good idea. And we're just going to apply a nice thick bead of hot glue. And don't forget, hot glue is hot, it will burn you. Hot. Line up our dimension so that our lines line up, and hold that there for a few seconds till our hot glue is dry. I think you can see from back there, this is where the plug is, and then just to show you that it doesn't interfere with the drawer, slides right in, no problem. The drawer is flush. If you wanted to add a drawer pull to it, you could pretty easily. You drill a hole, put the hardware on the inside, twist the doorknob in, or the drawer pull in, or 2 screws, however the instructions come on it, and you could have a drawer pull. I kind of like this nice little shape look to where it's flush. I like that look.
And here are a few shots of our completely refurbished end table. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit that like and subscribe button, and have a great day. Bye!